study guide there, a pen if you need it. Your mom. Well, we're on then. It's Tuesday night, everybody. Time for second look. And we are in Revelation 8. Revelation 8. If you've got are here and you've got a study guide, sorry to those that are watching online. You do not get one, but we have one here and it helps. We are, at this point, the scroll has been opened. The last seal has been broken. That means the scroll can now be opened. Think about it. You couldn't unroll the rolled up paper as long as you had any wax gobs on there, any seals. So the last one is open. That means the scroll can be opened. And that's what we dealt with last week. The scroll, you remember, came from the throne. The dilemma was no one was found worthy to open it, but then they found the lamb that was wounded, the lamb that had been slain, bloody lamb. And one of the elders tells John he can open it. And so there's rejoicing in heaven. Because the scroll is a legal document. Remember what we've got in the opening chapters of Revelation is we've got chapters 2 and 3, letters to the churches, and the warning to the church that appears over and over again, besides he who has an ear to hear, let him hear, what the Spirit says to the churches. The other warning is you've got to change. I have this against you, he will say to the churches. And then he will spell out something that needs correction. And if you correct it, you become an overcomer. And if you become an overcomer, you get some accoutrement, some equipment that goes with holy ones, robe, crown, scepter, throne, etc. So we get that in 2 and 3, and then in 4, there's an opening in heaven, a door is open in heaven, and maybe one week we'll take a look at the different doors in the book of Revelation. But in 4, a door is open in heaven. John sees it. He's invited to come up here, come up hither, it says in the King James. And he comes up, and that's when he sees the throne room scene, the divine council scene. And it is a courtroom scene, as are many of the throne room divine council scenes. We've looked at some of those in the past. And there is this legal document, the scroll. So what we've been doing up to this point is the seals have been successively broken. Now the last one is broken. The contents of the scroll are essentially the rest of the book of Revelation from this point, actually from 8:2, which we'll look at tonight, all the way to 22:5, is really the rest of the scroll. So the scroll open is essentially the rest of the book of Revelation. And once this last seal is broken, we find out what's going to happen. Now, last week we spent the whole time talking about the next event that follows the opening, the breaking of the last seal and the opening of the scroll is silence, dead silence. We won't go back and revisit that, but there was silence. And we looked at several reasons why that silence might have been a reality there. We kind of settled on this, that the silence was a hook back into, and remember what John is doing and what we're doing in this series is not looking for a roadmap to the end times, but what John is doing, and we're trying to think after him, is he's repurposing the Old Testament. Because he doesn't have a vocabulary to explain what he's seeing in these series of visions. So he comes up with this device. And what seems to be happening with this silence in heaven, the last seal broken, the scroll now open, we're really off to the races now. It'll be not judgment of the church. The church seemed to have survived judgment because they get thrones. Now it's judgment of the nations. And what seems to be happening before all of that kicks off is there's this silence, and it's to hook back to the silence before creation. Before there was anything, before there were the birdies in the treetops, or the sound of waterfalls, or anything, or laughter, or words, or the lowing of cattle, or any sound you can imagine, there was no sound before creation. We don't often think of that. But silence before creation is what probably John is trying to remind us of here, or he's reminded of. And then what came after the silence of creation? Once creation started, well, you had chaos, and then you had creation. So what John is showing us here with this introduction of a silence before literally all hell breaks loose, before the judgment comes, is he's reminding of the silence before creation, because what's going to follow this silence? Decreation. Back to chaos. You're going to go back to chaos. And that's essentially what we see with the judgments on the earth, is it's absolute chaos. It's increasing chaos. But it's decreation, where before you had a silence, Genesis I'm talking about, you had a silence and then you had creation. Well, now you have silence and then decreation and chaos. But then what will follow that? Eden again. Right? And so it all comes full circle. So that's where we left it last week. The idea of the silence was to loop back into the decreation idea. And that's going to be a return to chaos. And then God's going to reorder it all into a new Eden, kind of a replay of Genesis 1. Okay? Well, that's what we did last week. Chapter 8, verse number 1. We thought we were going to get further. We did one verse. All right? So 2 follows 1. That's where we're going to pick up today. Somebody read for us our passage again. Revelation 8:2 through 5. Who has it handy and can read it? Linda, you got it? Go ahead.
And I saw the 7 angels who stood before God. To them were given 7 trumpets. Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints. On the golden altar before the throne, the smoke of the incense together with the prayers of the saints went up before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. How far did you say?
That's far enough. So in this verse 2, which is where we're starting, what do you get? Then I saw the 7 angels. You get 7 angels, all right? This is going to be repeated. 8:2 is essentially going to be repeated in 8:6, kind of a bookend to what we're going to look at today. Then I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and the 7 trumpets were given to them. So the logical is, who are the 7 angels? All right? Who are the 7 angels? This is very interesting stuff, because now what we're dabbling in is definitely Second Temple stuff. We've talked before about during John's time, before John's time, Jesus' time, Paul's time, there was a lot of ideas that were swirling around. There was a lot of literature being produced. We've all heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls. That is Second Temple literature. And a lot of it was given over to end times, apocalyptic, end of days, what's happening, explanations, filling in the blanks that they felt like were left in the Old Testament. And so that it was a fertile time for all this. And so it's no surprise that when we're talking about who are the 7 angels, we can look back into some Second Temple stuff and kind of get an idea. Now I've got to tell you, in a lot of that literature, there will be 7 angels, usually 7 archangels are talked about when they're numbered like that, or 4. So you'll get one or the other. Here, John has chosen to use 7. Let me give you, for instance, and I should have written these on the board for you because you may want to jot these down. First Enoch, we've talked about that before. That is a Second Temple literature. It's been found in the Dead Sea Scrolls and a couple of other places. We don't have nearly all of it. There are literally holes in the documents, and so you kind of work around it. But parts of it are intact, and a part that's intact is chapter 20. They've divided it up in chapters like our Bible. Chapter 20, the first 8 verses deal with these 7 angels. So let's read. I'll just read. It's short. This is First Enoch, and if you care to find it, it's easily available online, free of charge. These are the names of the holy angels who watch. Uriel, one of the holy angels, who is in charge of the world and Tartarus. Remember Tartarus? The place where divine beings are punished, right? So Uriel, if you want spellings on these, yell out. This one is Uriel. I believe they all have an L. They do. They all have an L on the end, so I don't know the meaning of all of them, but I do know with the L there, it includes the name of God, El, Elohim, El Elyon. So Uriel, one of the holy angels who is in charge of the world and Tartarus. Another of these are archangels now. Raphael, 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 like the great painter. One of the holy angels who is in charge of the spirits of men. Well, this is the way they were thinking back in those days. Another one, Ruel, Reuel, one of the holy angels who takes vengeance on the world of the luminaries. The gods that are described as stars, those rival gods. Another one, easier name to spell, Michael, one of the holy angels who has been put in charge of the good ones of the people. They may be talking about supervision over Israel, righteous Israel. This is where we get the idea, this is one of the ways we get the idea that the different nations were allotted to the different Elohim, remember? Psalm 82. And it's thought that the one that was allotted to Israel was Michael. He is the guardian over Israel. And so that's reflected in this document. Michael, one of the holy angels who've been put in charge of the good ones of the people, and the thought there is the righteous of Israel. Another one, Sariel, S-A-R-I-E-L. One of the holy angels who is in charge of the spirits who sin against the Spirit. I mean, we could bog down and talk about some of this, but it wouldn't push us further in what we're trying to do. Next, Gabriel, you know that one. One of the holy angels, a couple of these you see are mentioned in the Old Testament. Gabriel, one of the holy angels who is in charge of paradise and the serpents and the cherubim, the throne guardians. So here you've got an archangel in charge, a divine being in charge of other divine beings. And then the last one, Remiel, R-E-M-I-E-L. One of the holy angels whom God has put in charge of them that rise. The names of the 7 archangels. So there you have it. What is John doing? Well, he's probably hooking back into this Second Temple literature idea because he mentions here 7 angels. So who are the 7 angels? That may help us a little bit. Let me read you another passage. It comes from another Second Temple literature book called Tobit, which is a little more accessible. You'll find it in some Bibles that include the Apocrypha. It's one of what are called the apocryphal books, and you'll find it in some Bibles. Catholic Bibles will have it, but others as well. And in Tobit, in the 12th chapter, because they divide it up similar to our Bible, in 12:15 of Tobit, it says this: I am Raphael. And I won't tell you the story, but he's identifying himself to a woman. I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand ready and enter before the glory of the Lord. So this angel has status. Because he has proximity to the Lord. He stands before. I am Raphael, one of the 7 angels who stand ready and enter before the glory of the Lord. When we talked about divine beings, we talked about one of the ways they're identified is by status and by access to the throne and how close they are to the throne. So there is that particular one who identifies himself as one of the 7. So I just bring it up because sometimes when we see these 7 angels that are going to blow these trumpets, which is the contents of the scroll, there is a temptation to identify them with the 7 guardian angels of the 7 churches in chapters 2 and 3. Remember, to the angel of the church of Ephesus, to the angel of the church of Laodicea, so on. And there is that tendency sometimes to do that. I think this is, to look at them like Enoch does, might be a little better for us. For the fact that angels as divine agents whose job is to execute plagues kind of follows a trajectory. It follows a pattern that we already have established in the Bible and in Jewish tradition. And that is the idea that angels could be appointed by God to perform the judgments against different ones. Think about the Egyptians at the Red Sea. Let's take a look in Exodus 12:23. Somebody find that. Somebody else find Psalm 78, verses 49 and 50. Like I say, the temptation, it's easy because it's close. It's in the book. It's in Revelation that we've already got 7 angels. Each church has an angel. And to identify these angels as those 7 angels, I'm not sure that's the strongest tradition. And there's a lot to commend the idea that in the past, God appointed angels to perform judgment against at least the Egyptians, and especially at the Red Sea. Somebody read for us Exodus 12:23.
When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top and sides of the doorframe and will pass over that doorway, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down.
Okay, so we're talking about Pesach, Passover here. But read the top of the verse again.
When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top.
Okay, when he goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians. Okay? Hold that thought. Take a look at Psalm 78, 49 and 50. What's it say?
He unleashed against them his hot anger, his wrath, indignation, and hostility, a band of destroying angels. He prepared a path for his anger. He did not spare them from death, but gave them over to the blood.
This is talking about the same incident. It's talking about the judgment on Egypt, all the way up to and including the Red Sea. In the passage that Brian read, it says the Lord is the one who brings this about. But there's further clarification in Psalm 78, and who is the agent through which it's done? Your Bible said, a band of angels. Destroying angels. That's a good catch, because that's kind of the point. I think this is where we probably should park, that what we're looking at here with these 7 angels is something very similar to what God did with Egypt and the Red Sea, with the plagues in the Red Sea, most especially the last plague, the Passover. I don't see any reason to line these 7 angels up with the 7 angels that watch over the churches. But I see all kind of reason to line it up with what we see in Psalm 78 and what we see in Exodus. Because think about it, the church is the one that's suffering in this scenario in Revelation. They're not really in any position to mete out judgment. So I think we're going to see, and it's without doubt, when the plagues begin to unfold, when the trumpets begin to blow, you're going to see a very definite connection between what happens in those judgments and the plagues of Egypt. So it makes all kind of sense that these angels that were employed to bring judgment on Egypt are going to be employed in a similar fashion. Same angels? I don't know. But in a similar fashion to bring judgment on the nations. Okay? I do think there's something here that connects the Exodus angels. They're the angels of the plagues back in the Exodus story with what we're looking at here. Because remember, what John is doing is the only way he can explain this stuff is hook back and say, it's kind of like. It's kind of like. And so here, most especially with the first 4 trumpets, it's going to line up perfectly with the plagues. You'll see it. So it makes all kind of sense that the ones who are bringing it are very similar to the ones who brought about the plagues in Egypt with that Psalm 78 that Linda read. But go back to that Psalm 78. She read verse 49 and 50. But so you can get an idea of what the passage is really hammering at, back up to verse 42. In this version it says, the Israelites did not remember God's power or the day when he redeemed them from the foe. So Psalm 78 is calling Israel to task because they've forgotten the Exodus. The Israelites did not remember God's power or the day when he redeemed them from the foe, when he performed his signs in Egypt and his marvels in the fields of Zoan. That's an area of Egypt. He turned their rivers to blood. Remember that one? So that they could not drink of their streams. He sent among them swarms of flies, which devoured them. Remember that one? And frogs. Remember that one? Which destroyed them. He gave their crops to the destroying locusts, and the fruit of their labor to the locust. He destroyed their vines with hail, and their sycamores with frost. He gave over their cattle to the hail, and their flocks to the thunderbolts. He let loose on them his burning anger, wrath, indignation, distress, and here it is again, a band of destroying angels. He made a path for his anger. He did not spare them from death, but gave their lives over to the plague. We're going to see those plague parallels, so it's very probable that we've got in these 7 angels a parallel to the ones who brought about that destruction in Egypt. Notice that it says, and in verse 51, kind of a switchback, it says, God, struck down every firstborn in Egypt. It's worth knowing, and you picked up on it. The death of the firstborn, that last plague, the death of the firstborn, is accomplished, and we've talked about this character before, called the Mashkit, M-A-S-H-K-I-T, Mashkit. It means the destroyer. Now here in Psalm 78, it's God. But in other passages, I'm thinking about 1 Chronicles 20, but there are others, it's an angel. It's an angel that dispenses the judgment in God's stead. So the destroyer can sometimes be God, and the destroyer can sometimes be an angel. And people could look at that and say, well, which is it? We're back to what we've looked at before. The idea of the 2 powers. The 2 powers in heaven. The 2 Yahwehs, if you will. And sometimes you see a Yahweh who speaks, and there's a Yahweh who's silent. There's a Yahweh who's seen, and there's a Yahweh who's unseen. And we may have something very similar to that here when we've got this mention of the destroyer. Sometimes an angel, sometimes it's God directly. Of course, the angel we're talking about is an angel of the Lord, and that is a divine figure. So again, the 2 Yahwehs, the 2 powers, it's kind of consistent that way. This is one of those cases where if you get to the bottom of one weird part, it helps you to connect the dots in another weird part. And that's kind of what this is doing. So the destroying angels are here in the book of Revelation. And you'll see that especially when we get into these trumpet judgments, especially the first 4 of them. It mimics the plagues in Egypt. So if it mimics the plagues, then we may be mimicking the angels too. Okay? I just went down that rabbit hole because it was interesting to me. I hope it was to you. So we don't have to necessarily identify him as the specific 7 archangels that Enoch talked about. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? It doesn't say. That terminology isn't used. But I do think the best way for us to get a handle on this is in the light of the Old Testament and to try and figure out what John is borrowing from here. And there we have a company of destroying angels, Psalm 78, in Egypt. The number 7 is used to denote what in the Bible? Completeness. Okay? And we've got utter decreation here. So we're going to go back to creation again. Take a look in verse 3, chapter 8. Verse 3 and 4. Another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer. And he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. Remember, we're in proximity to the throne here. Think in the tabernacle, in the temple. You had the altar of incense was where? It sat directly in front of the mercy seat, in front of the ark, the throne, right? That was guarded by throne guardians. The only thing that separated was a curtain, but it sat right next to. It was very close to. And that's what we've got pictured here in Revelation 8, is you've got this altar of incense, and it's very close to the throne. So another angel came and stood at the altar of the golden censer, with a golden censer. And he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. Very often, maybe all the time, in the Hebrew Scriptures, you see prayer as incense. Prayer is like an incense. Well, knowing what you know about incense, why would incense be a good picture of prayer? It goes up, right? Because of its heat, it's vaporous, it goes up. Prayers go up, right? What else? Huh? Yeah. Incense smells pretty good, doesn't it? It's not a nasty smell. It's a nice smell. It's a pleasing smell. It's an air freshener of sorts. Well, think about it. I mean, the temple and the tabernacle, you had slaughter going on all the time. Can you imagine the flies? And, man, nasty, nasty, nasty. So, yeah, it was nice to have a little incense thrown in there. And in fact, they would throw incense on the offering itself as it was burning. Anyway, so prayer is incense. That's not an unusual thing. But I think what's going on here is you've got prayer as incense for sure, but prayer as incense is a picture of accepted prayer. Prayers that are being accepted. In the Old Testament, it's the same way. Prayer is incense. Incense connotes a prayer that God accepts and that He will respond to. And that's for sure what's happening in this picture. Remember, you've got those saints under the altar, and they're saying, how long? That's their prayer. It's going up. In the Old Testament and New Testament, incense is always associated with sacrifices, right? It was added to the burning of the sacrifice as you would put the animal on the flame. You would add incense to the sacrifice in order to make it what? Acceptable to God. If they failed to put incense on it, it was a lost sacrifice. You had to sprinkle it with incense while it was burning. And so you've got that. Take a look in Leviticus 16, verses 12 through 13. We're going to see a case where that is the way it's used. Incense is thrown on the sacrifice to make it acceptable to God. On one very special day is this the case most particularly. And that's what we've got in Leviticus 16. You've got a long description of what you have to do on a very special day known as the Day of Atonement. In the Jewish calendar, Day of Atonement finished last Monday. Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. It's the most holy day of the year. And it's one of the three feasts that goes all the way back to the Torah, to the early scriptures. And in 16, you've got this extended passage on how you do what you do on the Day of Atonement. We won't read the whole thing. You can do it at home. But somebody read 12 and 13. Who's got it?
He is to take a censer full of burning coals from the altar before the Lord and 2 handfuls of finely ground fragrant incense and take them behind the curtain. He is to put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the smoke of the incense will conceal the atonement, cover above the tablets the smoke of the incense, cover above the tablets of the covenant law, so that he will not die.
Sounds an awful lot like what we're looking at in Revelation 8, doesn't it? What happens there? You remember the Septuagint? That's the LXX. That's the Roman number for 70. And that's the way the Septuagint, Sept, 70, is designated. That was the Greek version of the Old Testament. by Jesus' day, but actually quite a while before then, because of the influence of Alexander the Great and Greece and all of that, most people became more conversant with Greek than they were with Hebrew or even Aramaic sometimes, Jewish people. And so a couple hundred years before Jesus is on the scene, there is one of the founders of Alexandria, which becomes a seat of learning, a Greek named Demetrius. He commissions some Jewish scholars to translate the Old Testament into Greek, because he's building a library at Alexandria, and he needs that, and there are fewer and fewer people that can read Hebrew. So they do, and they do a pretty good job. And let me read to you the English version of that Septuagint passage that Brian just read, and you'll see that it lines up and that would have been the Bible that John would have been using, right? Greek version of the Old Testament. You'll see it lines up very nicely with what we've been looking at in Revelation. The priest will take his censer full of coals of fire off the altar, which is before the Lord, and he will fill his hands with incense. And he will put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the smoke of the incense will cover the mercy seat. Now you get a similar thing in other passages. If you want to take the time later, Exodus 30, verse 8 through 10, it's the same thing. And it talks about the incense and the burnt offering and the meal offering and links them all together, but all on the Day of Atonement. The Exodus 30 and this Leviticus 16 is talking about the Day of Atonement. That is very, very important. The point here is that the Lord hears the prayers of his priestly people. Okay? Now remember, who are the priests in the book of Revelation? Who are the priests? Believers. Believers. It's not a special select class. It's the believers. And the believers in the book of Revelation are the ones who are being martyred, right? They're the ones that are crying out, for justice. They're the ones who are suffering. So what is the point? Well, I think at least a partial point here is that the Lord hears the prayers of his priestly people. Just like using the Leviticus imagery of the Day of Atonement. And I think that's what John is doing here with this angel and the incense and the throwing and all of that. And he's connecting those prayers with the prayers of Old Testament people that God accepted. His priestly people. So what we've got here is accepted prayers. Since it is talking very specifically in Leviticus 16 about Day of Atonement, that I think is going to matter a lot too to how we read this Revelation 8. And really the rest of the Revelation all the way up to 22:5. It's the content of the scroll. So think about it. So the world is going to be decreated. And then it's going to be recreated again into a new Eden, just like what happened in Genesis. We get a kind of a replay. So there's a chaotic beginning, chaos, right? Remember, the earth was without form and void and all that. And God brings order to the chaos. That's what he did the first time. That's what he's going to do now. The world is devolved into chaos. And he produces out of all that, out of the chaos, the order out of chaos, he constructs a habitable world for humans. And we get the Garden of Eden. See? Now, what is the Day of Atonement for? Once a year, and again, Leviticus 16 spells out all the details, but part of it involved this incense, putting the incense on the offering to make the offering acceptable to God, because incense is a picture of accepted prayers. But what is the Day of Atonement? It's a reset. It's how you reset every year. That's why it's the most important day. It's more important than Passover, even to the modern Jewish people. It's more important. Day of Atonement. Because that's the day you reset. When you think about it, it's like a reset button. There are other resets in the Bible. I'm thinking about the Jubilee. Remember? Every cycle, it would reset. Contracts would be renegotiated. Slaves would be set free. Debts would be cleared. Properties would be restored. Every cycle. It was a reset. But so is the Sabbath. That was a reset. That was okay, let's start over. Let's start over. And you get that in the Bible, and the Day of Atonement is definitely hitting the reset button. Remember, the sacrifice that occurs on the Day of Atonement, Aaron, the high priest, kills a bull. And he does that for himself. He's got to purge himself of defilement. Okay? I've got a friend, he's in part of a Bible study that we do via Zoom early on Friday morning. He has devoted years to this. And anytime I have a question about the sacrifices, he's on top of it. But I was talking with him the other day, and he reminded me that on the Day of Atonement, the way it works is Aaron kills a bull. That's to purge himself of his defilement, because he's been bad. And because he's going to have to enter, this is the one time, he's going to enter into the sacred space, Holy of Holies, before the mercy seat. And on this day, he enters the Holy of Holies, and one of the things he does is he sprinkles blood on the mercy seat. Okay? 2 goats have been taken. We could talk a long time about that. But the one that's sacrificed is never sprinkled on the people, the Israelites, the people gathered there, the worshipers corporately. The blood is sprinkled on the tabernacle and on the objects, the holy objects, including the mercy seat. Now, why is that? To decontaminate them, to purge them. Essentially, what you're looking at is to restore them to their clean condition, right? So the Day of Atonement is all about reset. And if you look at it that way, it makes sense to have the Day of Atonement referenced here in Revelation 8. It's kind of like it's saying, God has heard the prayers of his suffering people. He's going to deal chaos. That's going to be the final death blow. The wicked are going to be decreated. In fact, the whole earth is going to be decreated. But the ones who persevere through all of this, make it to the other side, the new Eden, they're the righteous. They're the Lord's. They're the Lord's. And when you emerge on the other side, you're going to be in a new Eden. And it's kind of like, once that new Eden is in place, that there never was a fall. It's so completely restored. There never was evil. It's like there'd never been any of the ugly stuff. It's a total reset. It's Eden the way it was intended to be. And so introducing this Day of Atonement stuff with the incense and the censer and all of that, that would be a good way conceptually, wouldn't it, to communicate the point that what we're getting ready to do is reset. It's going to be a total reset. So all of this hooks back into these Old Testament themes. It sounds weird what the angel's doing here, but it's pointing to the reset. Even the presence of this company of destroying angels, I mean, what does that do? That takes your mind back to the plagues of Egypt, deliverance of God's people. So what we have here is 2 sets of images, and this is what I don't want you to miss. We've got a couple different images so far in these last 3 verses. Number 1 is the plagues with the angels. Like angels were the agents in the plagues, they're going to be the agents again. That's why we see them blowing the trumpets. That's Exodus. That's where you find that story. And all of this imagery is associated with the judgment of the gods of Egypt, all right? It's deliverance of the people of God. So our minds are taken back to the plagues of Egypt. God's people are delivered through that. Ultimately, it's chaos, but out of the chaos comes the order. And so then you get the imagery associated with the judgment of the gods of Egypt. That's what all those plagues were about. But the other image is the Day of Atonement. And that's in Leviticus. The descendants of Abraham are in Egypt. So chaos and the chaos of those gods that created it, it's all destroyed. The chaos is destroyed, the gods are destroyed, they're dealt with, they're judged, and then God's people are delivered. Day of Atonement, reset button. See? I think that's what John's doing here. Now, we've taken a long time, but that's just the way it is. To sort out what this man is doing and why he's saying the things he's saying. It's to get us to see these two images. We're going to have plagues again. The agents are going to be angels again, 7 angels, and it's a reset. So it'll be bad, but then it'll be incredibly good. So good that you won't remember the bad. It'll be a total reset, like the bad never happened. So that brings us to verse 5. Then the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it on the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. Now, that language should be familiar. Somebody take a look in Revelation 11, verse 19. Somebody else in 16:18. It says here, the fire results in thunders and sounds and lightnings and quaking. That is an identical expression of a description for final judgment. And later in the book, you get a repeat. Look at 11:19. Who's got it? Go ahead.
Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the ark of his covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a severe hailstorm.
Okay. How about 16:18? Who's got it? You got it, Linda? Go ahead.
Then there came flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. No earthquake like it has ever occurred since man has been on earth. So tremendous was the quake.
So you get this fourfold metaphor here of all these cosmic disturbances, thunders, sounds, lightnings, quaking. But we've seen it in the Old Testament. Take a look in Exodus 19, verse 16 through 18. Somebody else take a look in... no, that'll be enough. We're going to run out of time. Take a look in Exodus 19. 16. Who's got it?
You say 19?
Yeah, 16, 19. What did I say?
19. You said 16.
Oh, I've been slapped around. It's 19, verse 16.
On the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled.
Sounds similar. Sounds similar. If you later on want to look up more, Psalm 77, 17, 18 is another one. Isaiah 29, 6 is another. But you get essentially the same thing. And the reason I bring it up, and those are references back to the Exodus 19 events, which is what? It's the Sinai event. It's the Sinai appearance when you get all of that. So when we see thunders and sounds of lightnings here in chapter 8 and the quaking, and you get it again in 11, and you get it again in 16, It's language that's associated with the presence of God. See, it's hooking back into those passages. It's kind of a formulaic phrase, really. But it's going back to the passages that, like Sinai, that talk about the presence of God. Now, something very interesting. The reason I showed you that 11:19 and 16:18, where it's repeated, this fourfold cosmic thing is repeated, is you'll see the same language when the series of trumpets wraps up. You see it again. That's 11:19. When the trumpet judgments wrap up, you get that. And then you see it again when the bowl judgments wrap up. There'll be 7 of those. In chapter 16, you get it again. So we're going to see it again. After every series of judgments, you get the same formula that you get here when the final seal is opened. Final seal is opened, you get thunders, sounds, and lightnings and quaking. When the trumpets are over, you get the same. When the bowl judgments are over, you get the same. You're going to see it again, okay? It's all Sinai, presence of God stuff. Let's take a look at 2 final verses. Exodus 19, verses 16 through 18. That is the Sinai event. Somebody read that for us. And somebody else be ready with Ezekiel, and we'll sign off with Ezekiel.
You want Exodus 19?
Yeah, 16 through 18. Yeah, read it again.
I'm sorry. So it came about on the 3rd day, when it was morning, that there was thunder and lightning flashes and a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet sound, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. And its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the entire mountain quaked violently. That's 18.
So our chapter 8 is an allusion back to Sinai, which is the presence of God. But it looks to me like our chapter 8, verses 3 through 5 that we're wrapping up with, is really modeled to a great extent on Ezekiel 10, 1 through 7. See if you don't agree. Somebody read that for us.
I looked, and I saw the likeness of the throne of lapis lazuli above the vault that was over the heads of the cherubim. The Lord said to the man clothed in linen, "Go in among the wheels beneath the cherubim. Fill your hands with burning coals from among the cherubim and scatter them over the city." And as I watched, he went in. Now the cherubim were standing on the south side of the temple when the man went in, and a cloud filled the inner court. Then the glory of the Lord rose from the cherubim and moved to the threshold of the temple. The cloud filled the temple, and the court was full of the radiance of the glory of the Lord. The sound of the wings of the cherubim could be heard as far away as the outer court, like the voice of God Almighty when he speaks. When the Lord commanded the man in linen, "Take fire from among the wheels, from among the cherubim," the man went in and stood beside a wheel. Then one of the cherubim reached out his hand to the fire that was among them. He took up some of it and put it into the hands of the man in linen, who took it and went out.
This story comes immediately after an account in Ezekiel 9 where angels are commanded to slay all the unfaithful in Jerusalem, upon whose foreheads God's angel did not place a protective mark. You get this. So what we've got here, and it's what John is borrowing from, because this 8, 3 through 5, it looks an awful lot like Ezekiel 10, 1 through 7. So what you've got here is all this day of the Lord picture, right? You get it married to the Sinai imagery, which is a way to communicate the presence of God. God seated on the throne. It's Sinai. It was on the mountain. This is in, Revelation is in his holy temple, heavenly temple. And what is John doing? Well, he's communicating all of these ideas at once in a very short space by borrowing from here and here and here. And he's trying to say that the deliverance of God's people it's not going to come until there's a judgment on the gods of this world, like there was a judgment on the gods of Egypt. It's going to be a replay. It's going to be a replay. The difference is that this time the promised land is the new Eden. And it will be forever this time. So, the passage we've been looking at, 1 through 5 of chapter 8, it sets up for us several things, not only the decreation stuff that will follow all the way to Revelation 22:5, but it also sets up everything that follows even that, the vision of the New Jerusalem, Eden restored, the global Eden, the new earth. So next time we're going to take a very specific look at the plagues that are coming with the first trumpet and the first 4 trumpets. I think we'll get through 6 of the trumpets next week. That's my plan anyway. The 7th one comes later, but I think we can get through all 6 next week. And we're going to look at those plagues and how they hook back into what went on in Egypt. But beyond that, and there are a couple judgments. The first 4 really look a lot like Egypt. But there are a couple others that are very supernatural. And they're very different. They take us into the supernatural territory in a totally different way. And then the narrative really takes off. So anyway, so that's it. For those that have joined us online, thank you. And if you are in the neighborhood, this is a busy weekend for us. We got our picnic on Saturday. We got our 25th anniversary on Sunday. So if you do not have a home church, you'd be most welcome if you're in our neighborhood. Otherwise, we'll see you later. And that will take care of that.